Hey guys! This is part 2 of What If Hinata Had Neji's Personality. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start! Chapter 8. Do you understand? Shikamaru felt his blood run cold as Hinata stood up from Naruto's body. He was dead. There was no doubt about it now. He had given up his life to save hers. A valiant, noble effort. One that deserved to be remembered. Wow. I really didn't expect her to cry over him. Not like that, at least Tazuna, who was standing behind the shadow user, said. Shikamaru clenched his jaw and lowered his eyes to the ground as he paid his respects to his slain comrade. She always treated him like garbage. She never beat him up or anything like that, but she said some cutting things to him. I think she always felt guilty after saying them, though. It was pretty clear that she was starting to warm up to him a little during this mission. I can't imagine the guilt. Somebody you've used as a doormat for the entire time you've known them throwing themselves right into their own death for your sake. How is a person supposed to react to that? He said quietly. The bridge builder tapped him on the shoulder, prompting him to look up at the dome of ice. Hinata was back on her feet, and she was fighting. She was dodging many more of the needles than she had been able to previously, and she had connected on the airborne hunter several times. Despite the increased success, the pace at which she was being forced to attack and defend was unsustainable. Go help her. I'll be fine on my own, Tazuna said. The Nara opened his mouth to protest, but shut it again and handed the old man a kunai. He then sprinted off towards the frozen mirrors. Once he reached the edge of the structure, he stopped. There would be no point in entering the fray. He was much slower than Hinata, who was clearly the more sluggish of the combatants within the mirrors. What the hell am I supposed to do? I'm useless against that kind of speed. Hinata's eyes are what's keeping her alive, and I don't have a dojutsu. I'll be torn to ribbons if I go inside, he thought frantically. Just as panic began to settle in, Shikamaru noticed something. Every time Haku flew across the space within the dome, his shadow became visible for a split second. It was barely detectable, but it was definitely there. I can work with that, the shadow user thought to himself. He then made the hand seal for his shadow possession jutsu. His timing would need to be perfect. He would likely only 1 or 2 chances before the hunter caught on to his tactic. Shikamaru focused his vision and waited for Haku to come flying out of his mirrors. Once he did, the lazy genin launched his shadow into the dome of mirrors, missing the hunter's shadow by inches. Shikamaru growled in frustration. I need to send it out a few seconds early, or I'll miss by those same inches again, he thought to himself. As he waited for Haku's shadow to appear once more, Hinata glanced over her shoulder and spotted him. The shadow user put a finger to his lips. The hyuga girl nodded and returned her attention to the hunter. After another moment, Shikamaru sent out his shadow. Just as he had predicted, Haku came flying out of his mirrors a second later. Their shadows crossed one another, allowing the Nara to take control of his body and immobilize him. The hunter crashed to the ground, paralyzed by the lazy genin's jutsu. Hinata immediately rushed forward and struck Haku with a flurry of palm strikes. The hunter was launched backwards into one of his mirrors. Despite the impact, the frozen slab did not crack or move. Haku growled and forced his way to his feet, resisting and overpowering Shikamaru's shadow possession all the while. I can't hold him, Hinata! Hit him again! The Nara yelled. The hyuga heiress charged forward to continue her assault, but was forced back by a flurry of needles thrown her way by the hunter. Haku then broke free of Shikamaru's control entirely, sinking back into his mirrors once more. An absolute maelstrom of needles then came flying at Hinata from all directions, seemingly sealing her fate. Before the icy spears could make contact, they all melted away. What how? Hinata stuttered as the needles melted into a large puddle of water at her feet. A powerful, burning wind then came rushing into her back, causing her to stumble forward. She glanced over her shoulder and gasped. The superheated wind was coming from Naruto, who was rising to his feet slowly. The hyuga girl covered her mouth with her left hand as the previously lifeless genin stood up straight. The needles protruding from his body had melted away, leaving a multitude of small holes on his jacket. His eyes were glowing a blood-red color, and his pupils were slits. He slowly made his way past Hinata, stopping once he was between she and Haku. He glanced down at the terrified heiress, who had fallen to her rear end out of shock, and stared at her for several moments before returning his attention to the hunter. You're going to die here, Haku. Kakashi flinched as a wave of extreme heat came rushing through the battlefield. It had come from the dome of frozen mirrors. He glanced to his left to better identify the cause of the whirlwind. What he saw was disturbing, to say the least. Naruto was back on his feet, and he appeared to be glowing with a red substance that resembled chakra. His seal broke. Not good, the Jonin thought to himself nervously. He then looked to Zabuza, who was also confounded by the shocking turn of events. Your partner is going to die. He's awakened something he has no way to deal with, he said. The mist ninja scowled and charged forward, slamming his blade into Kakashi's pair of kunai. Sparks flew in all directions as the shinobi strained against one another. Even if you're right, that brat still can't stand up to me. Once I've killed you, he's next, he replied darkly. The pair separated and leapt backwards, both taking a deep breath. Zabuza then began to weave hand seals, which Kakashi mimicked perfectly. Water style, water dragon jutsu. They yelled simultaneously. The water that had previously been mist pooled around the shinobi and formed itself into a pair of dragons. The elemental beasts then slammed into one another, sending a shower of freezing cold water in all directions. Kakashi used a spray of moisture as an entrance into close range, rushing across the bridge and slamming a punch into the left side of Zabuza's jaw, sending him staggering backwards. Capitalizing on the moment of weakness from his opponent, the silver-haired ninja weaved another series of hand seals and reared his head back. Fire style, fireball jutsu, he yelled, launching a large sphere of searing flames into the mist ninja. The blast burst into a swath of flames on contact, the fire causing much of the moisture on the bridge to evaporate, creating a cloud of steam. Once the obstructions cleared away, Zabuza became visible once more. He had blocked the jutsu with his arms, which were now badly burned. Fire style? Not the smartest move against a water stylist. That hurt like hell, I'll give you that, but you're going to need a whole lot more than that to kill me, Zabuza said. Kakashi gritted his teeth and glanced back over to the ice dome. You'd better not lose it, Naruto. I don't think I'll have enough left in the tank to fight you after this fight is over. Hinata struggled to control her heart rate as Naruto stared down Haku. The tension in the air was palpable, but even more jarring than the sheer pressure being exerted by the blonde was the strangeness of the situation itself. Naruto had clearly died, or at least fallen into a fatal coma, and yet he stood on his feet, ready to fight. Is this what he meant when he called himself a monster? Hinata wondered to herself as Naruto shifted his feet. After another moment of unbearable silence, the resurrected genin vanished from sight. He reappeared 10 feet in the air, with a fist planted on the left side of Haku's jaw. The strike sent the hunter crashing into a mirror of ice, which shattered on impact. Haku went tumbling across the bridge, only managing to stop himself at the edge of the bridge. What incredible speed and power! He timed Haku-san's speed and shattered one of the mirrors with nothing more than the impact of a punch, the hyuga heiress thought to herself with her mouth agape. Naruto then roared viciously and sprinted after the hunter. The hyuga heiress struggled to her feet and attempted to steady her shaking hands to no avail. What on earth is going on? 5 minutes ago, he couldn't even touch him, and now he's battering him pillar to post. Just what are you, Uzumaki-san? She wondered to herself. She slowly walked closer to the one-sided fight that was being waged across the bridge, her steps becoming more and more unsteady as she approached. After a moment or two of shaky walking, she stopped and took several deep breaths. She had halted roughly 20 feet from the site of the battle. She now had a clear view of the fight and all that was happening within it. It was clear that Haku had nothing for Naruto. A simple glance at the look on his face, which was now exposed due to his mask having been knocked off, could have told even the most foolish man as much. Hinata flinched as the blonde floored the hunter with a brutal, right-handed punch to the left side of his jaw, knocking one of his teeth loose. He isn't getting up from that. This fight is over, Hinata thought to herself as Naruto stood over his fallen foe. The enraged seized Haku by the front of his shirt and lifted him from the ground. He bared his teeth and reared back his free left hand. It was at that moment that Hinata realized that Naruto had a set of serrated fangs and claws. The Hyuga girl turned her gaze away from the scene, preferring not to witness what appeared to be an inevitable decapitation. To her surprise, no tearing sound came. Hinata turned her head back towards Naruto, who had set Haku back down on the ground. The hunter appeared to be just as shocked as the Hyuga girl. The blonde then punched Haku in the stomach, crumpling him to his knees. Don't get the wrong idea, Haku. I haven't forgiven you for what you did to me, or Hinata for that matter, but I'm going to let you live. Try anything funny though, and I'll rip out your throat with my teeth, Naruto said threateningly. The hunter lowered his eyes to the ground and nodded. The blonde then glanced over his shoulder and spotted Hinata, who was staring at him wide-eyed. Do you get it now? He asked. Despite the vagueness of his question, the meaning of it was clear. The hyuga heiress opened her mouth, but no words came. After several more failed attempts to speak, Hinata finally forced words out of her mouth. No, I don't. I don't understand what I'm looking at. What is this? What kind of awful transformation is this? Where did Naruto Uzumaki go? The boy I knew was not this violent. The boy who died for my sake is gone. Who are you? She demanded. Naruto looked at his clawed hands and sighed, causing the red chakra to fade away. His nails returned to a normal length, and his fangs retracted. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Whether you like it or not, what you just saw was me. Probably the worst version of me, but still me, he replied. The hyuga girl stared at him, a whirlwind of emotions ravaging her as she attempted to process. Is this why you were shunned by the villagers? Is this why you never had a family? She asked quietly. The blonde gave her a pained smile. Yup. Most of them haven't seen what you just saw. In fact, you're only the second person to have seen that side of me, but they're still appalled by me, he said. Before Hinata could respond, the sound of crackling electricity ripped through the area. Naruto, Hinata, and Haku all looked to their left. Zabuza was being held in place by a pack on Niken, and Kakashi was charging what appeared to be a lightning-style jutsu. What an unbelievable chakra, Hinata said in a shocked tone. The distant Jonin then lowered his stance and prepared to make a charge towards the mist ninja. Haku, who had been seemingly battered to the point of being crippled, then disappeared from sight. He reappeared between Zabuza and Kakashi. His intervention had prevented the mist ninja from being impaled by the electrical jutsu, but it had also resulted in Haku himself being stabbed. Why the hell would he do that? Kakashi-sensei is just going to kill Zabuza anyways, Naruto wondered out loud. Rather than answering verbally, Hinata motioned for the blonde to follow her to the site of their teacher's battle with Zabuza. Naruto nodded and jogged after his teammate towards the Jonin. As they ran, the hyuga girl glanced over her shoulder at him. Once this is finished, you and I are going to have a talk. You have some explaining to do. Kakashi's eyes widened as he pulled his arm from Haku's abdomen. The boy had thrown himself in front of his master in a final effort to save his life, and it would likely cost him his own. As the Jonin's electrically charged arm was removed from his chest, the hunter fell to his knees and coughed up a sizable amount of blood. What the hell are you doing here, Haku? Didn't I tell you to deal with those brats? Zabuza demanded, his voice more emotional than it ever had been previously. The critically injured hunter looked to his master and gave him a pained smile. I was beaten, Zabuza-sama. Naruto-san unleashed an awful power. Something I had no way of defeating. I'm sorry for failing you, he said through a fit of painful coughs. The mist ninja stared down at his dying subordinate and sighed. I suppose we both lost today, Haku, he admitted. Haku opened his mouth to speak, but hacked up blood instead. After several more moments of painful convulsions, the boy stopped moving. Kakashi knelt down and searched for a pulse, but found none. He's gone. I'm honestly amazed that he managed to stay alive long enough to speak at all, he said. Zabuza struggled against the Jonin's Niken for a moment before looking to the silver-haired ninja. Would you mind letting me go? I need to pay my respects, he said. Kakashi remained silent for a moment before calling off his dogs and unsummoning them. The mist ninja knelt down in front of Haku and closed his still open eyes. He then whispered a word or two before standing up and turning to Kakashi. If you'd like to kill me, go right ahead. I'm exhausted, and you have numbers on your side. I'm a dead man walking, he said. As the Jonin was about to respond, the roar of a mob sounded off in the distance. The entire group of ninja all glanced to their right and spotted an oncoming horde of hooligans. They were being led by a short man with a cane who was wearing sunglasses. Zabuza growled to himself. That's your cue to leave. Gato, the man that hired me, is here, and he brought friends. I'll deal with these pathetic wretches, he said to Kakashi. The silver-haired ninja raised an eyebrow. Why should I trust you? He asked. The mist ninja chuckled and picked up his enormous sword. You shouldn't, but if you need a reason, it's because I have a personal vendetta against that man. He's always been stingy about paying his employees, myself included. I'm going to take that money in blood, he said with a dark grin. Kakashi hesitated for a moment before looking to Naruto, Hinata, and Shikamaru, who had silently watched the entire scene unfold from a safe distance. Get going, you three. I'll catch up with you, he ordered. The children nodded and took off in the opposite direction. Zabuza gave the Jonin a strange look as they prepared to fight off the horde. Why are you staying here? Why are you helping me? He asked skeptically. Kakashi drew another pair of kunai and assumed a stance. I've never much cared for cheapskates myself, he replied simply. The mist ninja laughed out loud and pointed his blade towards the oncoming mob. Great minds think alike, I suppose. Naruto chewed his lip absently as he leaned against a tree. It had been an exceptionally long day, and not a particularly good one. Hinata's reaction to finally having seen his demonic power had been far from ideal, and he had nearly lost his mind during his fit of rage. On top of that, he had also more or less died. Quite a day indeed. As he reviewed the day in his mind, a twig snapped several feet from him. He glanced up and saw Hinata staring down at him. Did you really think running out into the forest would stop me from finding you, Uzumaki-san? She asked, sounding somewhat irritated. The blonde sighed and shrugged his shoulders. Can you really blame me for wanting to be alone right now? He replied as he stood to his feet. The hyuga girl stepped closer to him and frowned. I don't mean to be rude, but I would rather skip all of this emotional drabble. I have questions, and you have answers, she said bluntly. Naruto chuckled. And you chew me out for my manners. Go right ahead. Ask me questions. Just a warning, I don't think you'll like the answers you'll get, he said. Hinata nodded and took a deep breath. First of all, what on earth was that ungodly power you unleashed against Haku-san? She asked. The blonde lifted up his shirt and pointed to the seal on his stomach. Are you aware of what a jinchuriki is, Hinata? He asked. The hyuga heiress' eyes widened, but she nodded. I am, yes. A person who harbors one or several ethereal beings. Usually demons, she said. Naruto pointed to himself and gave her a forced smile. That's what I am. I'm the jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, he said. Hinata stared at him for several moments before speaking once more. So, that's why the villagers repeatedly called you things such as demon brat or devil fox. As shocking as it is, that information does tie several things together. Let me guess, your birthday is October 10th? She asked. The excitable genin nodded. Yup. The same day the fox attacked Konoha 13 years ago. I don't know why the fox was sealed in me, but I know that it had to have happened on the day I was born, he said. The hyuga heiress studied him for a moment. All right, I have one other question. Are you capable of accessing the fox's power at will? She asked. Naruto shook his head. No. Only when I'm in a state of extreme anger. It's only happened one other time, but that's a whole different story, he replied. Hinata sighed. I'll be honest with you, Uzumaki-san. I really don't know how to feel about what I saw today. What you did to Haku-san was quite difficult to watch, even if he was my enemy. You became somebody other than yourself. For a brief few minutes, you were no longer Naruto Uzumaki, and that was quite unsettling to see, she said. The blonde snorted. That's a new tune from you. I thought I wasn't worth your time, he said. The hyuga girl, to his surprise, smiled at this. My opinion of you has changed for the better, from your perspective, at least. I've actually come to enjoy speaking with you, if only slightly. And, as much as it pains me to admit it, you can be quite funny on occasion, she said. Naruto stared at her wide-eyed. Oh, thank you? He stuttered, not knowing how to react to the sudden surge of positive reinforcement from his usually icy teammate. The hyuga heiress chuckled at his reaction. My. I didn't know it was possible to put you at a loss for words. Perhaps I should be nicer to you from now on. It would certainly save me some headaches, she said humorously. After several moments of silence, Hinata turned to leave. She walked a few steps before turning around again and making her way to Naruto. To the blonde's shock, she pulled him into a tight embrace, positioning her mouth by his ear. Thank you for saving my life. You showed me the ultimate form of mercy when I didn't deserve it. I'll repay you for that someday, I promise, she whispered. Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but was hushed by the hyuga girl. I know what you're about to ask me, Uzumaki-san, and you don't need to worry. I don't consider you to be subhuman simply due to your status as a jinchuriki. The boy who spoke to me as he lay dying in my arms was human. So heartbreakingly human. You're worth more than you think. All you need to do is believe it yourself, she said. She then separated herself from him and smiled. Oh, and thank you for calling me pretty, she said, obviously pleased by the compliment. She then turned around and began to walk back towards Tazuna's house. Before she could fully leave the blonde's line of sight, he called out to her. You could call me by my first name, if you want, he said. Hinata glanced over her shoulder and smiled almost imperceptibly. Good night, Naruto-san. Chapter 9, Gratitude. Naruto yawned as he sat up in bed. It was morning, and he had not been required to wake up early for the first time in quite a while. He and the rest of Team 7 had arrived home from their mission in the Land of Waves the previous night. They had received their compensation, which had been increased substantially due to the A-ranked nature of the originally C-ranked assignment. After the pay had been administered, all 4 members had rushed home. They had all been completely and utterly exhausted by the experience, and they had desperately needed rest. At least Kakashi-sensei gave us the day off. I think it was more for himself than us, honestly, the blonde thought to himself, as he climbed out of bed and headed into his modest kitchen. He mindlessly placed a cup of instant ramen into his microwave and sat down at his dining table to wait. As he sat in impatient silence, his mind wandered back to the Land of Waves. The mission had been a success overall, with Tazuna being safely returned to his home country without injury, building blueprints in hand. Zabuza Momochi had apparently survived the ordeal as well according to Kakashi. Apparently, the Mist Ninja had bolted once he and the Jonin had mowed through Gato's men. Not overly shocking, but still somewhat surprising to the Jinchuriki. The blonde's thoughts then traveled back to his and Hinata's battle against Haku, in which he had been put into a near-fatal coma for several minutes. The sensation of being so close to the doors of death was strangely unsettling to Naruto despite his relative misery. Well, I guess that puts a nail in that coffin, the genin thought to himself, an image of a noose finally being pushed from his mind entirely. The other major occurrence within the battle with the hunter was Hinata and Shikamaru's first sighting of the Jinchuriki's demonic chakra. Their reactions had been quite unconventional. Shikamaru blew it off and told me his mother was scarier, and Hinata got all touchy-feely for some reason. Not that I mind either reaction. They both made me feel nice, Naruto thought to himself with a smile. As he became more and more lost in his thoughts, he was rudely interrupted by the ringing of his microwave, which had completed its task of heating his ramen. He extracted his breakfast from the heating machine and blew on it several times. He then glanced up at the clock for the first time since awakening. Only 6:45? I guess I've got an internal clock. I figured it would take more than a week to develop, Naruto thought to himself as he ate his noodles. After several minutes of alternating between eating his food and sipping cold water, a knock came at the Jinchuriki's door. Naruto sighed and stood up from his seat. He made his way to the entrance of his dwelling and opened the door. "Good morning, Naruto-san." Hinata, who was standing at his doorstep. She, unlike Naruto, was already showered and dressed. She looked as well-groomed as always, polished and pristine at 7 in the morning. Figures, the blonde thought to himself as the Hyuga girl stared at him, patiently waiting for a response from the Jinchuriki. "Morning, Hinata. Not to be rude, but why are you here?" "It's kind of early," the unshowered genin asked skeptically. Hinata pointed to the family crest on the side of her shirt. "My father has requested your presence. I'm here to retrieve you," she explained. Naruto nodded and sighed. He had been expecting such a summoning. "Let me guess, this is about our mission?" he asked. The Hyuga heiress nodded and brushed a lock of hair behind one of her ears. "Most likely. I was questioned as to the details of our mission and what happened. I gave as favorable an account of your sacrifice and subsequent mauling of Haku-san as I could," she said. The Jinchuriki rubbed his eyes and stretched. "Thank you, I guess. Your dad seemed like a decent guy to me, honestly. Then again, maybe he was just being nice to get me to agree to being your bodyguard," he said tiredly. The Hyuga girl shook her head. "I doubt that. My father is a very straightforward and cordial man. He doesn't suck up to people, as they say. Although, I am slightly surprised that he extended that cordiality to you. Most of the clan heads view you as a nuisance," she said. The moment the final sentence left her mouth, a look of guilt flashed across her face. "Forgive me for my rudeness," she said quietly, bowing politely. Naruto burst out laughing at the gesture, earning a confused glare from his teammate. "What is so funny, Naruto-san?" she asked. The blonde slowly calmed himself down and allowed his laughter to subside. Once he did, he gave the girl a grin. "You bowing to me is literally the last thing I thought I would see this morning. You don't need to apologize to me, Hinata. You're not wrong. I kind of dug my own ditch with the other clan heads, so it's my fault they don't like me much," he said. The Hyuga heiress raised an eyebrow. "What did you do?" "Nothing overtly damaging, I hope," she asked skeptically. Naruto chuckled as he recalled his ingenious practical jokes. "I painted a clown face on every door of the Yamanaka estate, emptied the pantries of the Akimichi clan, replaced the Nara clan's shogi boards with oil-slick stone tablets, and I put catnip in the Inuzuka's dog food," he listed. Hinata sighed heavily and shook her head. "Thievery, vandalization, and several counts of breaking and entering. I'm honestly impressed. You managed to commit 3 crimes and avoid arrest. I suppose the clan heads have every right to despise you. Tell me, why did you never target the Hyuga clan? She asked curiously. The blonde chuckled. I'm a lot of things, but invisible isn't one of them. You guys have X-ray vision. Trying to prank you would be completely pointless. I'd just get a beating for my troubles, he said. The Hyuga heiress conceded a rare smile. It seems that a brain does lie within that dense skull of yours, Naruto-san. You have picked your battles well, she said humorously. The Jinchuriki scowled at the remark, but quickly regained his composure. We should probably get going, he said. Hinata nodded and motioned for the blonde to follow her. Naruto gestured to his attire. I haven't even showered yet, and I'm still in pajamas. Could you let me get ready first? He asked. The Hyuga girl nodded and turned back around. Make it quick. We don't have much time to waste, she said. The Jinchuriki responded by rushing back into his apartment and closing the door. Hinata chuckled as he frantically made his way into his shower, an action that could be heard from his doorstep. His manners are improving. Not quickly, but baby steps are necessary. Naruto whistled as he and Hinata entered the gates of the Hyuga estate. Beyond the extravagant architecture, the sheer size of the property was jarring. It stretched for at least 5 square miles, and the vast majority of it was finely trimmed and well kept. Even their landscaping is perfect. What don't these people polish? The blonde wondered to himself as he was led along by his teammate. As he looked around, he noticed the looks of confusion from Hinata's fellow clansmen. Must be pretty strange to see their future leader bringing the village loser into their home, he thought to himself as he and the Hyuga girl entered the main building. As they walked through the halls, the glares from the clan members became more and more disgusted. Ignore them. They have nothing to do with why you're here, Hinata ordered as she dragged him towards a lavish door. Once they reached it, the Hyuga heiress knocked 3 times and waited. After several moments, the door opened, revealing Hayashi Hyuga. Greetings, father. I have brought Naruto-san. Just as you requested, Hinata said with a bow. The Hyuga clan head nodded and motioned for Naruto to enter the room, which appeared to be a study. To the Jinchuriki's surprise, Hinata stayed put as he entered her father's study. Once he was inside, Hayashi closed the door and sat down behind his desk. Welcome, Uzumaki-san. I see that you're all in one piece. Rather impressive given the nature of your first out-of-village assignment. Quite a wild scenario, really, he said. Naruto nodded and sat down in a chair across from the man. I'm as surprised as you are. I was convinced I was going to die during most of the mission. Hell, I kind of did at one point, he said. Hayashi chuckled to himself. What was it like? Dancing with death, I mean. I've always been fascinated by the concept, but I obviously have other obligations that keep me from exploring, he asked. The blonde thought for a moment before answering. It was odd. I felt like I was waking up from a dream. Like my whole life had been a vivid hallucination. Before I could really understand what was happening, I woke back up again. Sorry if that wasn't too helpful, he explained. The Hyuga clan head nodded. Not a problem. Most people don't remember their near-death experiences especially well. What I've called you here to discuss is what happened after you woke up from your brush with death, he said. The Jinchuriki immediately felt any comfort he had settled into fade away. I figured. I guess you want an explanation of how I beat the hunter? He asked quietly. To his surprise, Hayashi shook his head. I'm well aware of how you did it. Your status as the jailer of the nine-tailed fox has been known to me since you were a small child. Uzumaki-san, he said. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows. What do you mean? He asked skeptically. The Hyuga clan head activated his Byakugan and pointed to the boy's abdomen. My clan helped create that seal on your stomach. I was aware that the fourth had sealed the beast within you immediately after the attack, so I kept an eye on you. Your childhood is quite well known to me, he explained. The genin raised an eyebrow. Since you already know about the fox, what do you want to talk about? I beat up the hunter using its power, which I can't summon on my own, by the way, he asked. Hayashi smiled and took a sip from a cup of water sitting on his desk. I would like to thank you for saving my daughter's life. You willingly paid the ultimate price for her sake, even though she had been less than kind to you previously. On top of that, you quite literally rose from the dead to prevent her death a second time. You thoroughly surpassed my expectations. And Hinata's, from the sounds of it, he said. Naruto bowed awkwardly. No problem. I just did what you asked me to. Besides, I really didn't want her to die. She can be a little icy sometimes, scratch that, all the time, but she didn't deserve to die for it. Also, what do you mean when you say I surpassed her expectations? he asked curiously. The Hyuga clan head chuckled. She called you by your first name, Uzumaki-san. In the Hyuga clan, using a person's first name is a sign of great respect and familiarity. She also appeared to be slightly less outwardly disgusted by your presence than she has been previously, he explained. The genin grinned, only slightly. Not much progress, but still a step forward, he joked. Hayashi chuckled and glanced up at the clock that hung on the left side wall of the study. Earning her approval won't be easy, I can assure you, but I think you'll find that it's well worth the pain, he said. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. The Hyuga clan had responded by motioning him away with a wave of his hand, a silent order that the blonde immediately followed, exiting the study briskly. Hayashi smiled as he listened to his daughter question the Jinchuriki on the other side of the door. Perhaps I said too much. Oh well. I think my prediction will come to pass. I'm sure of it now. For the last time, I was polite and proper. How many times do I have to tell you that? Naruto groaned. Hinata, who had been bombarding the Jinchuriki with questions for the past 5 minutes, sighed and rubbed her temples. I'm simply making sure. Any insolence on your end could cost me dinner. I would rather not go hungry, Naruto-san, she said. The blonde frowned and poked her in the stomach, eliciting an uncharacteristic squeak from the Hyuga heiress. Are you sure you aren't starving already? You have no fat on you, he said. Hinata turned bright red and scowled at the floor. I diet in order to keep my weight low. Mobility is the core of my taijutsu, so I must be lightweight and flexible, she explained, obviously embarrassed to reveal such information. Naruto frowned at this. You should still eat. Come with me. You're going to eat some ramen, he said. The Hyuga girl turned her glare from the floor to the Jinchuriki. I will do no such thing, she said stubbornly. Her teammate responded by pulling out his wallet. Come on, we don't have all day. I'll pay, he said, turning around and making his way down the hallway as he spoke. Hinata watched him walk away for several moments before finally snapping and jogging after him. Fine. Just this once, I'll humor you. This will not be the norm, so don't get your hopes up, she said haughtily as she caught up with her teammate. Naruto glanced at her and chuckled. I'm only doing this to make sure you don't die of hunger. Even you deserve to eat something with actual flavor every once in a while. Who knows? Maybe you'll even enjoy yourself, he said. The Hyuga heiress glared at him out of the corner of her eye for a moment before sighing and turning her gaze to the approaching gates of the Hyuga estate. We'll see. Chapter 10. A Caring Hypocrite. Shikamaru smirked as he moved his game piece. For the 5th consecutive time, he had defeated Kakashi in shogi. Despite the string of victories, none of them had been as effortless as the Nara had expected them to be. For a man who claimed to have only played shogi 3 times previously, the Jonin was quite a skilled strategist. The silver-haired ninja threw up his hands in a motion of surrender. That's all I've got. You're ridiculously good at this game. Iruka told me that you were smarter than you looked. I didn't believe him at first, but it seems like he was right, he said. The shadow user shrugged and began to put away the game board. I'm just more practiced than you are. For a guy who apparently never plays, you made that tough as hell for me, he said as he gathered the pieces and dumped them into a small bag. He then folded up the board itself and tucked it away in his carry case. After several moments of silence, Kakashi motioned to the window of the cafe they were sitting in, prompting Shikamaru to look through the glass. That's surprising. She doesn't look all that pleased, but she isn't throwing up either, the Nara said as he watched Naruto and Hinata walk down the streets of Konoha, both carrying a cup of takeout ramen. Kakashi watched his students converse and eat their food for several more moments before turning back to Shikamaru. As odd as their dynamic is, I'm glad Hinata hasn't decided to shun him for his status as a Jinchuriki. Naruto needs a friend. Especially a female one, he said. The Nara raised an eyebrow. What difference does it make that she's a chick? Women kind of suck. In my experience, at least, he asked skeptically. The silver-haired ninja chuckled at the comment. Knowing your family's taste in women, I'm not surprised you think that. As for why it makes a difference, it's because women have a way with comfort. They can make you feel worthwhile, he said. The shadow user glanced back out the window, where he saw Hinata scolding Naruto for an unknown sin he had apparently committed, likely something to do with his still limited manners. Are you sure she's making him feel worthwhile? Looks to me like she's crushing up his confidence and scattering it on the ground like salt in the winter, he said. Kakashi scratched the back of his head as he watched Naruto quietly slurp his noodles while being lectured. Well, she can be nice sometimes, which is better than nothing, he said. They watched the pair for another moment before turning their attention away from the window. I heard that the Chunin exams were pushed back a month. Why is that? Shikamaru asked, changing the subject. Kakashi sighed and leaned back in his chair. Well, the Raikage, who was scheduled to attend this year's exam, was just hit with a charge for violation of human rights. Kumogakure has been disqualified from the testing. Under most circumstances, the exam wouldn't be forced to change dates due to a withdrawal, but Kumo was covering a good portion of the event costs, so we need extra time to prepare, he explained. The shadow user furrowed his eyebrows. Violation of human rights? What did he do? He asked. The Jonin scowled as he recalled the meeting that had been held earlier that week by Hiruzen. He was taking children from various Kumo clans and subjecting them to horrific testing. We don't know why exactly, but it doesn't matter. He'll be behind bars soon enough, he said in a disgusted tone. Shikamaru shuddered. What kind of sicko would do that? To a bunch of kids. Demented asshole, he muttered. Kakashi nodded in agreement. Speaking of the exams, I've been thinking about putting in a recommendation for you three. Given that you have an extra month to prepare now, I don't think it would be a terrible idea, he said. The lazy genin thought for a moment. Not a terrible idea, but I kind of doubt that any of us can really compete with any of the more experienced genin. Especially me, he said. The jonin shook his head. I disagree. Hinata would almost certainly tool quite a few of the other genin, and if Naruto were to awaken the power he used against Haku, he would maul most chunin. You're probably capable of finding a way around a good portion of the others too. I like Team 7's chances, he said. Shikamaru shrugged and stood up from his chair. Your guess is as good as mine, I guess. I'm going home for the day. I'll see you around, he said, walking out of the cafe as he spoke. Kakashi watched his student leave and ordered himself a cup of tea. I've got myself a weird group of kids. A Jinchuriki, a clan heiress, and the sharpest procrastinator I've ever met. Not a bad team at all. Hinata silently weaved around another corner as she quietly trailed Naruto through the streets of Konoha. It was night, and the sky was pitch dark. For the second time, the hyuga heiress had decided to follow her teammate home. After begrudgingly accompanying the blonde to an early lunch, Hinata had split from him and completed her predetermined list of chores. From cleaning the kitchen to completing basic taijutsu drills, she had kept herself busy for most of the day. As generally productive as the day had been, it had also been quite dull and mundane, with very little interesting happening. Even Naruto's conversation with her father had not been particularly eventful according to either participant. What does it say about me that I honestly prefer days on which I have missions? Hinata wondered to herself as she watched Naruto slowly trek along. Her reasoning for more or less stalking her teammate was much less clearly defined this time around than it had been the first time. The hyuga girl had simply felt compelled to follow him when she had spotted him walking past the gates of her home at sunset. I feel so creepy. Why am I doing this? This is no more exciting than any else I did today, Hinata thought to herself. Then, as if in scorn of her view of the walk as being boring, something interesting happened. Naruto stopped walking, seemingly noticing something to his left. Out of curiosity, Hinata quietly glanced left as well, spotting a small group of men approaching. They all appeared to be a bit on the old side, with the youngest-looking man appearing to be no less aged than 40 years. They slowly made their way to the blonde, stopping roughly 10 feet from him. Naruto then began to converse with the men. He seemed to be somewhat familiar with them, as he appeared to be unsurprised by their arrival. As the conversation wore on, the men slowly spread themselves out around the Jinchuriki. It was then that the hyuga heiress noticed an empty sake bottle in the hand of one of the men. Her blood ran cold as Naruto was slowly boxed in. The blonde appeared to sigh to himself as his unwanted company closed in on him more and more. What is he doing? Why isn't he moving? Hinata thought frantically. One of them men then attempted to snatch Naruto's wallet from his right hand, a movement the Jinchuriki easily saw coming and adjusted his positioning to defuse. He was then grabbed from behind by another man. Once again, Naruto defended himself, shucking the villager from his back and backing up. After several more similar sequences, the man who appeared to be the ringleader hit Naruto over the head with his empty sake bottle. The hyuga girl covered her mouth in horror as the blonde dropped to his knees. What happened next was all too predictable. Naruto was beaten until he gave up his wallet. Once he allowed his billfold to be taken, the men left, leaving him battered on the street. The hyuga heiress watched with bated breath as Naruto climbed back to his feet. His face was streaked with blood and his ribs were clearly bothering him. He stood silently for several moments before spitting a bit of blood out of his mouth and continuing his walk home. Hinata's self-control finally eroded away. She sprinted out from behind the corner she had been using as a hiding place. Her rapid footsteps alerted the Jinchuriki, who turned around to face her. Naruto-san. Are you Hinata began, stopping when she noticed the look on Naruto's face. He looked like the absolute last he wanted was to be questioned as to his physical or mental state. What are you doing here, Hinata? He asked quietly. The hyuga heiress struggled for an answer for several moments before the blonde sighed heavily. You followed me again, didn't you? He asked tiredly. Hinata nodded, embarrassed to admit that she had been trailing him, but knowing that lying was pointless. Yes, I did. I was curious as to why you were out walking so late at night, so I decided to follow you, she admitted. Naruto studied her for a moment before nodding and turning back around. Kind of weird, but I guess that makes some sense. I've got to go get some sleep. I'll see you tomorrow, Hinata, he said, waving goodbye as he walked away. Surprising even herself, the hyuga girl rushed after him and spun him around by his shoulders. Why didn't you fight back? I know for a fact that you could have easily disarmed those men and gone about your night. Why would you willingly take a beating? She demanded, a mix of begrudging concern and genuine frustration permeating her voice. The blonde sighed. Isn't it obvious? If I even touch these people, I'll end up in jail. Even if the Hokage likes me, the council doesn't, and they would do everything they could to make sure I suffered, he said. Hinata tightened her grip on his shoulders. It sounds to me like you're giving up. Are you just going to be their doormat for the rest of your life? She asked. In a rare moment of anger, Naruto seized her wrists and removed her hands from his shoulders. You don't get it. I don't get the benefit of the doubt. I have to be submissive. I can't afford to fight back any more than I have to. I'd be dead by now if I did. I have no witnesses, no family to back me up, and no money to buy any of those things, he snapped, pain and frustration visible in his eyes. The hyuga girl flinched at his tone and the close proximity of their faces. Just because I told you a little bit about what happens to me doesn't mean you have the right to judge me or my decisions. What you just saw isn't all that bad, honestly. A cut and some bruised ribs are pretty tame. Go home, Hinata. I'd rather not have you seeing me all beat up anyways, he said. Hinata, to his surprise, refused to move. No, I won't. You're going to explain all of this to me. Where, when, and how often this kind of thing happens. I can help you, she said. Naruto snorted. Let me ask you this then. If you're so concerned, why didn't you even try to help me while they were beating me up? Why did you just watch? He asked. The hyuga heiress felt her stomach drop. I don't want your pity, Hinata. If you're just going to watch me suffer and then tell me how much it sucks for you to see, then leave me the hell alone. I'm trying really hard to be a good teammate for you. I'm even trying to be your friend. But you're making it so hard, the blonde said, his voice weakening at the final words. He lowered his eyes to the ground and balled his hands into fists. I froze. I wanted to help you. I really did. I followed you because I was worried. I've been thinking about what you said in the Wave Country. That you had been beaten by the villagers. I wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. I failed you, and I failed myself. I'm sorry, Naruto-san. I really am, Hinata said shakily. The Jinchuriki sighed heavily. You didn't fail anybody. Calm down. I've gotta say, it's a little strange that you're so open about being worried about me when you treat me like shit during the day. It's not as bad as it was, but you're still anything but nice, he said. Hinata pursed her lips. I'm not very good at being nice to people, she said quietly. To her surprise, Naruto put a hand on her shoulder. I can tell. We all have problems. I suck at being polite, and you suck at being nice. How about this? I'll try to teach you how to actually be nice to people, and you teach me how to be polite. Agree to that, and I'll forget about this whole thing. Deal? He said. The hyuga heiress stared at him for several moments. I suppose that sounds reasonable. Once again, I'm sorry for not helping you. I was shocked, and before she could finish her sentence, Naruto pushed a finger to her lips. I don't want to hear it. Just try to be a bit more sensitive, he said. Hinata nodded and grabbed the blonde by the arm, pulling him along in the opposite direction. What are you doing? My apartment is the other way, the Jinchuriki complained as he was yanked through the street. I'm going to patch you up. That cut on your forehead is deep, and it will likely require stitches. Think of it as my first act of kindness, Hinata replied. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, but shut it again. Thanks, Hinata, he muttered as he was led through the gates of the Hyuga estate. She glanced back at him and smiled slightly. You're welcome. Just a warning, we don't use anesthetic when we put in stitches, she said, sounding far too pleased with the idea of painfully threading his wounds. The Jinchuriki began to sweat nervously. That doesn't sound very nice, Hinata. It's not very polite to refuse your hostess hospitality. Chapter 11, Conceding Concern. Naruto wiped sweat from his brow as he ran along the perimeter of Konoha. Kakashi had sent he and the rest of his team out on what he called an endurance run, which meant that they would be running 8 laps around the village. The running itself was effortless, as stamina was and always had been a strength of the blonde. He had completed 4 laps, and he was well on his way to finishing his 5th. Hinata was roughly half a lap behind him, and Shikamaru was another half lap behind her. The distance between he and the rest of his team inadvertently provided the blonde with several minutes of alone time. As he completed his 5th lap, the Jinchuriki's thoughts wandered back to the previous night. The stitching on his forehead would be a steady reminder of what had transpired until the wound healed entirely. The night had been a long one, with a variety of powerful emotions taking hold of Naruto at different points. From his exhausted apathy towards the beating he had accepted to the indignant anger he had felt towards Hinata due to her complete lack of sensitivity. The beating, however, was what had stuck in his mind. Why didn't I just run away? I've done it before, so why was this time different? Why did I dash, he wondered. Before he could finish the thought, another voice cut him off. One that Naruto had only heard one other time. Because, deep down, you feel as though you deserved it, a deep, ancient voice said. The blonde tensed at the voice within his mind, knowing all too well who he was now conversing with. What the hell do you want? I don't remember asking for your opinion, he snapped mentally. The demon chuckled and audibly shifted. I don't need your permission to speak. Besides, you did ask a question. I simply told you the truth, he replied. Naruto scowled and picked up the pace at which he was running. You don't know what you're talking about, he said defensively. The fox grinned within his mind, sensing a point of weakness to pry open. Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Every single morning, you ask yourself why you even bothered waking up. All of your mistakes, all of your insecurity-fueled practical jokes, it haunts you. You took that beating as a form of self-punishment. In the back of your mind, you were disappointed that they left you with nothing more than a deep gash and a bruised rib, he said. The Jinchuriki remained silent for several moments before responding. Just shut up and leave me alone. I would have stopped them if they had actually tried to kill me. They were drunk and angry, but they weren't out to kill, he snapped back at the demon. The fox slowly slid back into his subconscious. Before he disappeared completely, he spoke one last time. I live within your mind. I can read your thoughts. Right now, the heiress dominates your subconscious. Never forget that she likely would have left you to die if those men had decided to try to kill you. Even if you had defended yourself, you still would have been fighting alone. She doesn't care about you, and she never will, he said before fading away and leaving the blonde alone again. Naruto sighed and glanced around at his surroundings. Wait, is that Kakashi-sensei? He wondered as he recognized a figure roughly 100 feet ahead of him. As it turned out, the blonde had increased his pace so drastically during his 5-minute conversation with the fox that he had finished the final leg of his 5th lap in record time. This meant that he had 3 laps left to run. At least I'm more than halfway done, he thought to himself as he passed his teacher, who was sitting on a bench reading his orange-covered book. Once he had completely passed him, he caught sight of the hyuga estate up ahead. It was as large and imposing as always, with its extravagant gates showing strongly in the morning sunlight. Honestly, I'd rather live in an apartment. Easier to clean, Naruto thought as he jogged past the mansion. After another few minutes of running, he came across an interesting sight. Sasuke, who looked exhausted and irritated, was being gushed over by Sakura. Sitting several feet away from them was Shino, who was quietly observing the situation. As much as I don't like the guy, I do feel bad for him. Can't she just take a hint? The genin thought as he made his way past his former classmates. The scene triggered another train of thought within his mind, which led to a question that he had never bothered asking himself. Why did I ever like Sakura to begin with? Was it because she was smart? I mean, she was well studied, but never all that quick, and she wasn't nice to me at all. She's kind of cute, I guess, but so are a lot of girls. Just a phase. We all have them, he thought to himself. As he trekked on, his thoughts remained on a similar topic, but regarding a different person, and with a slightly different tone. What do I think of Hinata, exactly? I mean, she's kind of a bitch most of the time, but every once in a while, she says something nice. She even cried when I died, so I guess that means she cares at least a little bit. She also brought me a rice ball this morning. I think it was her personal way of saying sorry. I don't even like rice, he thought to himself, chuckling as he recalled the scene from earlier in the day. Come on, I could definitely out-wrestle Kiba, Naruto argued. Shikamaru shook his head and took a sip of water from his canteen. He doesn't play clean. He bites, scratches, and he'll pull your shirt over your head. He did that to me when we wrestled, he replied. The blonde frowned. That's not even wrestling at that point. That's a fist fight, he said. The shadow user shrugged and stretched. Exactly. He out-wrestled me, but I won the fight. I broke his nose and moved on with my day, he said matter-of-factly. Naruto burst out laughing at his words. Man, I didn't think you had a temper. Remind me not to piss you off, he said through his laughs. Shikamaru snorted. I don't have a temper. He said he wanted to wrestle, but then he bit me. So, it's only fair that I do something equally dickish to him, he said in an irritated tone. As the boys conversed, Hinata made her way into the training field, carrying a small object. She briskly walked to the boys and waited patiently for an opening in the conversation. After several moments, she tapped Naruto on the shoulder. Good morning, Naruto-san, Nara-san. I have brought you both breakfast, she said, presenting two objects to the boys with one hand outstretched towards each. Why am I only getting a saltine cracker? Shikamaru asked dejectedly. The Hyuga girl shrugged and pushed her left hand, which held a rice ball, towards Naruto. Because I would assume that you actually ate breakfast. Naruto-san did not, she said. The Jinchuriki frowned and stared at the rice ball. How did you know that I didn't eat this morning? He asked skeptically. Hinata fully turned to face him and practically shoved the food into his mouth. That is none of your concern. Now eat, she ordered. Naruto sighed and did as he was told, taking the rice ball, which was practically in his mouth already, and began to chew on it. To his surprise, mostly due to his general dislike of rice products, it was perfectly edible. How is it? I spent most of my morning making it, Hinata asked, practically staring a hole in his skull as she watched him eat, never blinking once as she did so. After finishing the rice ball, Naruto wiped his mouth and gave her a thumbs up. Pretty good. I never took you for the cooking type. I'm pleasantly surprised, he said with a satisfied nod. Hinata, in a rare moment of girlishness, reddened slightly. I am quite capable culinarily. As was my mother, she said proudly. Naruto chuckled at her suddenly positive attitude, an action that was immediately noticed by the Hyuga heiress. She immediately shifted from her jovial mood to one of composure and coldness once more, giving the Jinchuriki a curt nod and jogging off to stretch. Naruto sighed. She's still got a lot of work to do. At least she's trying now. She's kind of creepy when she's trying to be nice now that I think about it. Not quite in the hot way either. More in that stalker sort of way. Then again, she kind of is 1 foot, the blonde thought to himself, as he reached the last leg of his run. Naruto slowly decreased his pace to a walk as he reached Kakashi to conclude his 8th and final lap. After he had finished it, he glanced to his teacher. Is there anything else you want us to do today? We already sparred and drilled our basic jutsu, he asked tiredly. The Jonin glanced up from his book and shook his head. You're free to go. Don't get used to short days like this, though. I have a meeting to attend, so you guys benefit. Be ready for something brutal tomorrow, he said before returning his attention to his book. Naruto nodded and walked off to go about his day. After several more minutes, Hinata finished her 8th lap as well, looking much more fatigued than her teammate had. How much did he beat me by? She asked between deep breaths. Kakashi thought for a moment, doing several calculations in his head. 4 minutes, 15 seconds? Around 1.5 miles in terms of distance. Before you get down on yourself, remember that Naruto, for all of his quirks, is genuinely one of the greatest stamina athletes we've had in Konoha for quite some time, he said. Hinata sighed and sat down on the bench next to her teacher. I know that it's been a little while now, but what did you think of Naruto's display of demonic power against the hunter ninja? She asked abruptly. The silver-haired ninja raised an eyebrow and shut his book. Well, it was less surprising to me than it was to you, because I already knew about the fox. In fact, the whole reason I was worried about continuing the mission once the ante was upped was because I knew that Naruto would likely be cornered at some point, and I wasn't confident in my ability to safely subdue him once he inevitably lost control, he admitted. The Hyuga girl considered his words for a moment. Actually, he was quite composed for somebody whose body was completely overrun with demonic chakra. He was violent and erratic, but there was still a person trapped within his rage. He systematically took Haku-san apart. He took away his ice mirrors immediately by shattering them, and he forced him to fight on his terms. His taijutsu was still far from appealing to look at, but it was tailored to shut down Haku, she said. The Jonin chuckled and gave Shikamaru, who had just arrived, permission to leave. Once the shadow user was gone, he spoke. How did you feel about the transformation? What did you feel like looking at it up close? He asked curiously. Hinata's face contorted with discomfort, and a mix of several different negative emotions. It made me angry, and it greatly scared me. I felt as though I was looking at a cheap copy of Naruto-san, who had just given up his life to save mine. I desperately wanted to wake up from the nightmare that was reality. A boy whom I had treated like trash had gotten himself killed for my sake, and then returned from the dead seemingly fueled by the devil himself. It was a lot to process, she said honestly. Kakashi listened attentively, and smiled underneath his mask. He really appreciated your concern. It was the first thing he said to me once the mission was over. For somebody like him, simple gestures of kind and caring go a long way. You clearly aren't all that good at being pleasant, but if you could try to treat him nicely, it would be greatly beneficial for this team, he said. The hyuga heiress was immediately reminded of her conversation with the blonde the previous night. I'm already working on it. It may take a while though, she said. The jonin reopened his book and leaned back on the bench. As long as you're trying, I don't care. Hayashi rubbed his eyes as he rounded a corner in his massive estate. It was quite late, and most members of the clan were already asleep. He himself never abided by the tradition of being asleep by 10 o'clock, meaning that his being conscious was not unusual at this hour. What was unusual, however, was the fact that Hinata was putting on her coat and strapping on her sandals. If you need food, we have some in the kitchen. There's no need to waste your time walking at this hour, Hayashi said to his daughter, who flinched and glanced over her shoulder at him. Hello, father. I'm not looking for food, actually. I have something to attend to. I won't be long. I should be back in less than 20 minutes, she assured him. The clan head sighed and leaned against the wall. You're going to follow him home again, aren't you? He asked, not needing to name the individual at hand to get his point across. Hinata remained silent for several moments before nodding somewhat guiltily. I am, yes. I would like to make absolutely certain that he is not harmed on his way home. And if anybody tries, I'll subdue them, she explained. Hayashi sighed sadly as he recalled the previous night, on which a somewhat frantic Hinata had dragged Naruto, who had been sporting an almost comically large cut on his forehead, into the estate. Before you leave, tell me something. What is it you hope to accomplish by being inconsistent? If you wish to gain his approval, you must be steady and stable, not an unpredictable whirlwind of arrogance, and seemingly random displays of kindness, he asked. The hyuga heiress prickled at his question. I never said I wanted his approval. Why on earth would I want the favor of a lowlife like him? She asked, visibly flinching at her own use of the term lowlife. The clan head shook his head and knelt down next to his daughter, who had settled into a seated position against the wall with one sandal on. Listen to yourself. You hurt yourself just by insulting him for the sake of your pride. Beyond that, you never cook for other people, not even me, and yet you woke up at 4 in the morning to make a single rice ball, something you had never attempted to make before for him. You may not like it, but you desire to be recognized as a one-half of a positive relationship by him, he said. The hyuga girl groaned and buried her face in her knees. I don't even know why I'm committing so much time and energy to him. Last night was our second most positive conversation, and it still involved an angry outburst from both of us, she said quietly. Hayashi put a hand on her shoulder. I think I may know why. It's because you're kind. Despite the mask you wear, you dislike watching people suffer. Especially those who already have nothing. Compound that with the fact that you still owe him your life on some level, and it makes perfect logical sense that he would dominate your motivations and consume your energy, he said. Hinata, to his surprise, nodded and stood up. She put on her remaining sandal and headed for the door. That makes sense. I think you may be right. Thank you, father, she said before exiting the estate and jogging off towards the gates. The Hyuga clan head watched her leave and smiled to himself. You've touched her, Uzumaki-san. I'm impressed. Your true test, however, will be what you do now that you have her attention. Chapter 12, Worry. Kakashi grinned as Naruto snapped Hinata's head back with a hard punch. The Jonin had ordered his genin to spar. The method of matchmaking was identical to the first time they had sparred, with each of them fighting both of their teammates once. Unlike before, Hinata was not utterly dominating her fellow genin. Naruto, at least, was putting up an excellent fight. Shikamaru, who was watching alongside his sensei, whistled as the blonde ripped a hard punch into the Hyuga girl's gut. He's really good at punching people in the stomach. He sucks at literally everything else, but it's working for him right now, Shikamaru commented. Just as the words left his mouth, Naruto was struck in the ribs with a palm strike from Hinata, causing him to cough up a bit of blood and back up. He's a natural when it comes to taijutsu. None of it is pretty, but he has a pretty good idea of what he's trying to accomplish and how he's going to do it. Unfortunately, that lack of polish is costing him big time right now, the silver-haired ninja replied as Naruto was buckled by a kick to the left side of his head. What happened next was a shock to the entirety of Team 7. As the Hyuga girl stepped forward to finish the match, Naruto clobbered her with a hooking punch to the left side of her jaw, taking her legs away momentarily and dropping her to her rear end for a split second. Damn. He sat her down, Shikamaru said, his mouth wide open. Despite the knockdown, Hinata popped back to her feet instantly and attacked with renewed aggression, knocking Naruto to his back with twice as much force. Kakashi immediately rushed to the space between his students. That's enough. Well done, you two. Much better performance than last time, Naruto, he said with an approving nod. To his surprise, Hinata stepped forward and offered a hand to her fallen teammate. The blonde furrowed his eyebrows skeptically, but took the hand and stood to his feet. You actually listened to my advice. You used your left hand, the Hyuga girl said. Naruto scratched the back of his head and grinned. Well, it was all I could hit you with, so I kind of had to. You still served me up, though. You hit hard for such a small girl, he said jovially. Hinata immediately prickled at his words. I'm no smaller than you are. In fact, I may be an inch taller than you, she countered defensively. The Jinchuriki shrugged and dusted himself off. Sure, but I'll bet I'm heavier. How much do you weigh? He asked. Hinata's face flushed red with embarrassment. She shook her head rapidly. I'm not telling you that. You should never ask a lady her weight, she snapped indignantly. Naruto frowned. Why? I mean, it's not like your number would be all that embarrassing. You're in good shape, he said. The Hyuga heiress rubbed her temples and attempted to drain the redness from her face to no avail. It's still rude. There are some questions that you don't ask. Haven't we already talked about this? She asked tiredly. Naruto shook his head. Nope. The only thing you've talked to me about is actually using my chopsticks when I'm eating ramen. Decent advice, but nothing to do with body weight, he said. Hinata sighed. Just don't ask again, okay? Let this be your lesson in etiquette for the day, she said. Naruto nodded and began to walk past the girl to join Kakashi in watching the oncoming match between Shikamaru and Hinata. Before he could pass her completely, the Hyuga girl reached out and seized him by the collar of his shirt, pulling him closer to her. 90 pounds, she whispered before releasing him and turning to face Shikamaru. Her face was still bright red, all the way from the point of her nose to the tips of her ears. Naruto raised an eyebrow, but resumed walking, reaching Kakashi after a moment. What was all that about? The Jonin asked curiously. The Jinchuriki shook his head and winced as Hinata planted her shin across the right side of Shikamaru's ribs. It's a long story that I don't really feel like telling right now. I'll explain it some other day, he said. The silver-haired ninja chuckled. Either way, you had her hot and bothered at the end there. Not sure how you did it, but I'm impressed, he said with a thumbs up. Naruto snorted. No, she was pissed. Anger is her default emotion. Well, that and insensitivity, he said. Kakashi frowned at his words. I don't think I would class insensitivity as an emotion. It's more like a personality trait, he said. The blonde gave his teacher a tired look as Hinata effortlessly evaded Shikamaru's strikes. Is that really any better? He asked. Kakashi thought for a moment before shaking his head and pulling out his orange-covered book. Not really, but you asking how much she weighed was exactly sensitive either, you know, he pointed out. Naruto shrugged. At least I had a reason to ask the question, he said. The Jonin smiled under his mask at the comment, and she actually answered you too. Not sure why, though, he said humorously. The pair then lapsed into silence as Shikamaru was slowly pummeled. After a few minutes, Kakashi decided that he had seen enough, despite the shadow user having remained vertical the entire match. That's enough, you two. Hinata is the winner, he called out to his students. They immediately ceased fighting and jogged their way over to Naruto and Kakashi. As you all know, the Chunin exams are in a little more than 3 weeks. I'm planning on entering all 3 of you. Last year's exams were some of the most violent in recent memory, with Sanigekure utterly dominating the competition. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how competitive you are, they're going to be competing again this year. As such, I want you all to be well prepared. Shikamaru, Hinata, I've already spoken with your families, and they'll be handling around 70% of your training. Naruto, you'll be with me. We'll still have group sessions, but only in the mornings. The rest of your time will be spent with your clans, except for you, of course, Naruto, he explained once they reached him. The group nodded. For now, that's all I've got for you all today. It's going to be dark soon, so I'd suggest getting dinner or something like that. Breakfast won't be a good idea tomorrow, because I'm going to make the most of our sessions from now on, the Jonin said. At this, the genin began to walk away. The silver-haired ninja observed the children as they trekked on. As they grew smaller and smaller due to the distance between them, Kakashi smiled. At least one of you is going to become a chunin. The best part is that I'm not sure which. Naruto yawned as he made his way out of the training field. As Kakashi had said, it was beginning to darken, and it wouldn't be long before it was pitch black. The day had been fairly uneventful, save for sparring, which was as hectic as it always was. I actually managed to knock her down today. I'm not sure how, but I did it, Naruto thought to himself proudly. Then, as if on cue, he was tapped on the shoulder. Good evening, Naruto-san. Hinata, who had tapped him, said. The blonde chuckled and turned to face his teammate. You saw me 5 minutes ago. You don't need to be so formal, he said. The hyuga heiress ignored his comment and continued speaking. You and I are going to have dinner. Come, we don't have all night, she commanded abruptly. Naruto frowned as he was tugged along. You're not even going to ask if I want to have dinner with you? Because I don't really want to eat out, he said in an irritated tone. Hinata glanced back at him over her shoulder, her expression softening slightly. Please, she said quietly. The Jinchuriki studied her skeptically for a moment before allowing himself to be pulled along. What's her deal? He wondered as they rounded a corner. Eventually, Hinata led him into a small cafe in the northern sector of Konoha. By the time they walked through the door, it was completely dark, with only the half-moon to illuminate the night. Once they were fully inside the small establishment, Hinata directed Naruto to a small table in the far right corner in the back on the dining area. I've never even seen this place before. How'd you find it? The blonde asked as they sat down across from one another. Hinata shrugged and thanked the server, who handed her a drink, but predictably opted to let Naruto go thirsty. Excuse me, ma'am. Would you mind extending any services you provide to me to my companion as well? The hyuga girl asked, her tone bordering on anger, but not quite. The woman flinched and glanced over her shoulder. Why, yes. Forgive me, Hyuga-sama, she said before scurrying back to the kitchen to retrieve a glass of water. Hinata then returned her attention to Naruto. I come here regularly. As you said, it's quite difficult to find, so it's almost never busy. In fact, I may be what is keeping this place running monetarily, she said, answering his earlier question. The Jinchuriki nodded, quiet and empty. Reminds me of you, he joked, well aware that he was walking a fine line. Hinata raised an eyebrow, a subtle smile spreading across her lips. It seems that myself and your skull have quite a bit in common, she retorted. The blonde laughed out loud. So you can joke. I should insult you more. You're more fun when I do, he said between laughs. The hyuga girl narrowed her eyes at the comment. Go right ahead. See where it gets you, she challenged dangerously. Naruto instantly felt the atmosphere shift. He quit laughing and put up his hands defensively. Just a joke. You don't have to threaten me. Like I said before, loosen up a little, he said. To his surprise, Hinata did not immediately snap back at him. Instead, she gave no response at all, opting to simply stare at him blankly. The blonde sighed and snapped his fingers, shaking her from her apparent trance. Quit doing that. You scold me for being rude, but last time I checked, staring at people isn't exactly polite, he said. Hinata lowered her eyes to the table and mumbled an apology. Naruto's already present frown strengthened. Why is she being so subdued? This isn't like her at all, he wondered to himself. The server then returned with his water and waited expectantly for their orders. Hinata ordered a stick of dango, and Naruto ordered a bowl of ramen with a rice ball on the side. Once the server left, Hinata finally spoke audibly. What are your thoughts regarding the Chunin exams? Do you believe that our team is ready? She asked. The Jinchuriki thought for a moment before answering. I think we'll do fine. Your eyes are great for tracking, and you're slick as hell in taijutsu. Shikamaru can think his way out of just about anything, and I'm apparently immortal. I like our chances, he replied. The hyuga girl nodded and took a sip of her water. I believe the survival portion will be effortless. Our cell is well-rounded and offensively capable. We shouldn't struggle all that much with finding ways around whatever they send our way. What concerns me, however, is the one-on-one combat that we will be required to participate in. I mean no offense to you, but there are two people that I don't think you're capable of beating as you are, she said. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Who would these people be? He asked curiously. Hinata pursed her lips and pointed to the hyuga crest on her sleeve. One of them is my cousin, a member of the branch family, Neji Hyuga. He, alongside myself, is the most talented child of my family's current generation. The second is likely Sasuke Uchiha, but I have my doubts about that after today, she said. The blonde nodded. What gives you doubts about Sasuke? Not that I disagree with you, because I don't, he asked. The Hyuga girl turned her head and showed him the right side of her jaw, which was bruised. You have a natural talent for taijutsu. As blessed a punch as it may have been, you still knocked me down. A feat only accomplished by my father before today, she said. Before Naruto could respond, the server returned with their food. The pair decided to put their conversation on hold to eat a few bites of their meal. Elbows off the table, Naruto-san, the heiress ordered. The Jinchuriki grumbled, but did as he was told. After a minute or two of eating, Naruto spoke again. I'm pretty confident I can beat Sasuke. He was always stronger than me by a little bit in the academy, as much as I hate to admit it, but I think I've grown enough to take him down. I don't know enough about Neji to say whether or not I think I would have a chance, he said. Hinata lightly chewed her dango and studied her teammate. If I may say so, I believe that the version of you that fought against Haku-san post-revival would chew up and spit out any of our fellow genin without any trouble at all, she said. Naruto shook his head. You're probably right, but I won't be using the fox's power if I can help it. I don't want to maim anybody, he said. The Hyuga girl chuckled. I still find it absolutely incredible, Naruto-san. What you did in the Land of Waves, I mean. You committed voluntary, enemy-assisted suicide, died, and then rose to batter the man who had killed you. Quite a feat, she said. Naruto shrugged and took a bite of a rice ball on his plate. I was operating on another gear. I don't even remember half of what I did, he admitted. Hinata sighed, seemingly out of relief. The pair went on to discuss several other topics before finishing their food and exiting the restaurant. I enjoyed that more than I thought I would. Thanks, I guess, Naruto said once they were out in the street once more. Hinata nodded and put up the hood of her jacket as a cold wind blew. When she didn't respond verbally, the blonde turned and began to walk. I'm going home. Have a nice night, he said, waving once as he walked. After a moment of peaceful travel, rapid footsteps caught the attention of Naruto, who glanced back over his shoulder. Did you forget something? He asked Hinata, who had jogged to catch up with him. She shook her head and fell into step beside him. No, I'm going to walk you to your apartment, she said. The Jinchuriki opened his mouth to protest, but shut it again when he received a hard glare from the Hyuga girl, who was clearly in no mood to argue. After several minutes of uneventful walking, they reached the stairs that lead to Naruto's dwelling. They ascended them and reached the door, where the blonde turned around to face Hinata. Why were you so bent on walking me home? That's kind of out of character for you, he asked skeptically. The Hyuga girl tensed at the question, turning her gaze to the floor. I was simply being polite. If I'm to teach you how to be cordial and proper, I need to follow my own advice, she said. Naruto shook his head and closed his front door, which he had opened a moment previously. Or was it because you were afraid that I would get mugged again? He asked. Hinata sighed and nodded her head dejectedly. Yes, it was. I know that you don't like the idea of being coddled, but I feel awful about sitting idly by while you were attacked. I wanted to make absolutely certain that you weren't harmed. That you arrived home safe and sound, she admitted quietly. The Jinchuriki smiled. Is that why you dragged me out to get dinner? To give yourself an excuse to walk home with me? He asked. The Hyuga heiress gave a barely detectable nod, her eyes still downcast and her face contorted with guilt. Naruto then surprised both of them by sliding an index finger under her chin and lifting her face. Hey, look at me. You don't have any good reason to feel bad about what you did tonight. I really appreciate it, Hinata. That was really sweet of you, he said reassuringly. Hinata stared at him wide-eyed. She had never trekked onto such personal grounds with another living person before, and it was showing. You don't need to say anything. Just try not to stare so much. It's kinda weird, the blonde said with a chuckle. He then released his gentle grip on her chin and opened his door to enter his apartment. Before he closed the door, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. By the way, your rice ball was a hell of a lot better than that cafe's, he said before closing the door and slipping inside. Hinata's cheeks and ears gained a pink tint as she watched the door. After a moment, she smiled and folded her hands over her chest. Good night, Naruto-kun. Chapter 13. Considerations and Discussions. Hinata flopped onto her bed and sighed. It had been an excessively long day of drilling, and she was utterly exhausted. Every part of her body hurt, from her knees to the joints in her fingers. The Hyuga girl was used to such soreness by this point, as her training regimen had always been brutal, as was expectable for the future leader of the clan. As she caught her breath, she rolled over onto her stomach and rested her chin on her hands. I'm making progress. This pain is worth it, she thought to herself as she stretched her back and rolled over onto her side. The group sessions with Team 7 were tame when compared to her clan-specific training, and much more enjoyable. It had been 3 days since the arrangement had been made, and all 3 of the days had been marked by the same pattern. Hinata would wake up at 6 in the morning, make her way to the training grounds, lightly bicker with Naruto about either etiquette or taijutsu, complete her drills, and then leave. From there, she would return home and spend the rest of the day training with Hayashi. I wish my sessions didn't run so late. I never have time to watch, she thought to herself, somewhat embarrassed by her own train of thought. Her mind then returned to the place it had routinely journeyed to over the past 72 hours. I wonder if he heard me? I don't think he did, but it would be quite embarrassing if it were the case, she wondered. The occurrence her brain was referring to was the conversation she and the blonde had partaken in outside of his apartment 3 days prior. During said conversation, Hinata had, albeit once the encounter was more or less finished, attached an affectionate honorific to the end of his name. As frustrating as it may be proved to be in the long run, Naruto-kun's density comes in handy every once in a while, she thought humorously. The hyuga heiress then smiled as she allowed her mind to focus on one detail of their conversation in particular. He likes my cooking, apparently. Perhaps I should make something else sometime, she thought to herself. As she was imagining these things, the door to her room opened, revealing her sister, Hanabi. Somebody looks tired, she said as she stepped into the room. Hinata nodded and sighed, cracking her neck several times. I am. Drilling was absolutely hellish today. Understandably so, but a painful experience nonetheless, she said. Hanabi chuckled and sat down on the bed next to her sister. She then poked Hinata on the cheek. Warm-faced, are we? What's on your mind, elder sister? She asked with a wry grin. Hinata tensed slightly, but calmed immediately. Nothing like what you're thinking. As I said, training was difficult, and I'm still warm from it, she said, her tone holding a subtle underbelly of defensiveness. Her sister giggled and tilted her head to one side. Would this happen to have something to do with why you arrived home so late several days ago? She asked with a grin. The hyuga heiress shook her head rapidly, her face now red. Hanabi laughed out loud at her usually astute sister's girlish reaction. It does have something to do with that. Oh, how scandalous, Nasan, she teased humorously. Hinata sighed and buried her face in one of her pillows. Leave me be, Hanabi. I don't want to talk about this right now, she said tiredly. Hanabi patted her on the back and laid down next to her. You could at least tell me his name, she said. The hyuga heiress rolled over onto her back and glanced at her sister. Naruto Uzumaki, she said quietly. Hanabi raised an eyebrow at the response and frowned. I mean no offense to you, but that seems like quite a poor choice. I've seen him here with you several times, but I never suspected that you were. She began. Before she could finish, she was silenced by a glare from Hinata. I would prefer if you didn't pass judgment on him without having fought alongside him first. I understand your concern. I too considered him to be a wretch, but he has proven me wrong. He is quite admirable, she said. Her sister studied her for a moment before speaking. You sound awfully conflicted despite the compliments you're giving him. Why is that? She asked curiously. The hyuga heiress drew her knees up to her chest and rested her chin on them. I don't know how I feel about him at all. On the one hand, I do find him to be quite irritating, but on another, he has proven himself to be reliable, good-natured, and shockingly intelligent. Every once in a while, he can even be sweet, she said quietly. Hanabi furrowed her eyebrows. It sounds to me like your feelings are quite straightforward. You desire him. Even the people you greatly appreciate are going to get on your nerves from time to time. Just accept the fact that you wish to lock him in a dark room, and she said. Hinata managed to slap a hand over her sister's mouth before she could finish the sentence, but the message was still clear. No, nothing like that. I would never do something so unbecoming. As for my feelings being straightforward, you're right in that they should be, but they aren't. I treated him like an insect for the vast majority of our mission during the Land of Waves, and yet he still gave up his life for me. Even after all of that happened, I still treated him poorly, to the extent that I left him to be beaten in the street when I could have helped him, she said, her voice weakening a bit at the final sentence. Hanabi gave her a sympathetic look and patted her on the back. It sounds to me like you feel unworthy of him. Like you don't deserve to be treated kindly by him after your indiscretions against him. I must say, I feel quite the same about a boy I've been interacting with. It's a difficult feeling to get over, she said. Hinata nodded and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a small smile slowly spreading across her lips. He's been shockingly forgiving. He even claimed to enjoy the rice ball I made, she said, a trace of happiness returning to her voice. Her sister's eyes widened. Wait, that's why you were cooking at 4 in the morning the other day? I just thought you were hungry. That is just adorable, she said with a grin. The hyuga heiress sighed as Hanabi giggled. You mentioned a boy that you felt guilty about treating poorly. It sounds to me like you and I are in similar positions. What's his name? She asked curiously. The young hyuga ceased her laughter and reddened a bit. That's neither here nor there, Nasan. Konoha Marukun is none of yours, she said, only realizing her mistake once the sentence was 80% complete. It was Hinata's turn to laugh, which she did. Oh, little sister. You have such a loose tongue. Don't worry, I'll keep this quiet for you, she assured Hanabi as she laughed. The young hyuga sighed in relief. At least I have the free time to fix my mistakes. Good luck, Hinata-nezen. I hope this all works for you, she said before hopping off the bed and exiting the room to prepare herself to sleep. Once she was gone, Hinata smiled and tucked herself under her covers. I think I'll make dango tomorrow morning. Let's see if we have the same taste in food. Shikamaru rubbed his eyes as he sipped on his water. He glanced to his left at Naruto, who was consuming noodles at an absolutely breakneck pace. There were at least 7 bowls piled on the counter of Ichiraku's ramen stand, and the pile was only going to grow at the rate the blonde was eating. I get that Kakashi-sensei worked you hard today, but is it really necessary to eat a literal ton of ramen? You're going to puke, the shadow user asked tiredly. Naruto nodded and continued to eat. After roughly 30 seconds of ravenous eating, the Jinchuriki spoke. He made me run up 100 trees 3 times each. On top of that, he made me spar him a few times, so I'm a little beat up too. Today sucked. I've earned this, he said as he ate more noodles. Shikamaru sighed. That sounds rough. All I did today was practice using shadow possession and do some basic taijutsu drills. I still had to deal with my mom though, so I'd still trade with you if I could, he said. Naruto finished his bowl and stacked on top of his other 7, bringing the total to 8. I'll bet neither one of us is being worked as hard as Hinata. When you come from a family that famous, they've got to have some insane standards for you to meet, he said. The lazy genin nodded and rested his chin on his hand. She's probably doing what we should be doing and getting sleep. She, like you said, probably needs it even more than we do, he said. Naruto ordered another 3 bowls of noodles and yawned. You know, she's actually a lot nicer than she comes off. Well, maybe nice isn't the right word. More like thoughtful. She forced me to go to dinner with her a few days ago, and it turns out she was trying to make sure I didn't get beat up on the way home, he said. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. That's really pretty sweet. If only she was like that day in and day out, he said. The Jinchuriki rubbed his eyes and nodded in agreement. I know, right? I've been trying to give her pointers on how to be nice, so maybe that'll help in the long run, he said with a shrug. The shadow user finally folded and ordered his own bowl of chicken-flavored ramen. She doesn't seem like the type to take advice from someone her own age. Especially a teammate, he commented. Naruto sighed and twirled his chopsticks. Yeah, she's not super coachable. I think she's trying, though, which I appreciate. She has a bad habit of staring at people, so I'm trying to get her to do that less, he explained. Shikamaru chuckled. You do realize that she only stares at you, right? It isn't really a problem if it's purely isolated to one person, which it is, he replied. Naruto's eyes widened. Wait, really? That's even weirder, honestly. I should talk to her about that, he said. The shadow user shook his head and grinned. No, leave it be. I think you'll like where this all leads if you do, he said wryly. The Jinchuriki, at the height of his metaphorical density, gave his teammate a look of confusion. What's that supposed to mean? It stresses me out when she tries to burn a hole in my skull with her eyes, he asked. Shikamaru snickered. At least she isn't looking any lower. She could literally undress you with her eyes, he thought to himself humorously. At the thought, the lazy genin burst out laughing, earning a glare from his oblivious teammate. What's so funny, lazy ass? He asked dangerously. The shadow user shook his head and tamed his laughter to a low chuckle. Nothing important. Still, don't point out that she stares at you only. Trust me, it'll mean good things for you, he said. Naruto remained silent for a moment, clearly racking his brain to decipher the reasoning behind his teammate's advice. Eventually he gave up and nodded. Fine, I'll keep my mouth shut, he conceded. The boys continued to discuss various topics until the clock struck midnight, prompting them to go their separate ways for the night. Luckily, despite the lack of a silent, pale-eyed girl watching over him from the shadows, Naruto walked through the door of his apartment unscathed. Kakashi took a deep breath as he jogged around the perimeter of Konoha. It was roughly 2 in the morning, and the Jonin had been completely unable to sleep, prompting him to go for a nighttime run to settle his mysteriously jittery nerves. Naruto is a fascinating person to work with. He's clearly talented in a variety of areas, and much smarter than you would think he is. What I can't put my finger on is why he struggles so much with Genjutsu. He has the chakra for it, and his control isn't that bad, he thought to himself as he passed the Hokage monument. His thoughts then wandered to upcoming exams. Matchup-wise, I think all 3 of them should be fine. The only 3 people that are overly threatening to them are Sasuke, Neji Hyuga, and Rock Lee. Even then, Naruto might be something of a nightmare for Sasuke at this point with the amount of clones he can create, and his taijutsu is getting much better. Hinata likely loses to Neji, though. Then again, all 3 of them lose to Neji as they are now, he contemplated. Kakashi continued to dissect and analyze the individual matchups one by one, poking holes in the tactics and strategies of the opposing genin. Lee is problematic for Shikamaru due to the speed difference, but if he can survive for long enough, I would trust him to figure something out. Hinata might carve Lee up early, but once again, the speed would be an issue. Naruto and Lee is fascinating, but Naruto would need a way to badly hurt him to win, he thought with a frown. Suddenly, an idea manifested in his mind. He stopped running and held out his left hand. Rasengan, he said quietly. After a moment of silence, a swirling ball of blue chakra formed in the palm of his hand, a humming sound accompanying it. The Jonin smiled underneath his still-present mask. I was planning on teaching Hinata Chidori at some point, because I'm pretty sure I know what her chakra nature is, but this one could be a perfect fit for Naruto. Yes, I think this'll work, he thought. He allowed the sphere to fizzle out and continued running. Naruto is going to love this.